Hello, Barb. How are you?
Hi, Chris. I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. So as we prep for the holidays, we thought it would be fun to sort of pick a couple of our team's favorite episodes
Mhm.
and do a little bit of a reshare on the podcast show. And so you are going to share your favorite, but before you do, you do a tremendous amount of work with us at Career Crossroads and behind the scenes and live with our events and our online sessions. But you're not on the podcast very often, so for those listeners who may not really know who Barb is, why don't you now get to give your infamous escalator pitch? Well, the escalator pitch line is infamous. Your pitch is not infamous. What, why don't you share with everybody a little bit about you and the work you do here with the team before we just jump
Okay.
right into your pick?
Okay, sure. I'd be happy to. I am the VP of Operations here at Career Crossroads. My last name is pronounced Reese, even though it certainly doesn't look like it should be. And something that is surprising for many people to know is that I've actually been with Career Crossroads almost as long as there has been a Career Crossroads. I have planned every single colloquium or meeting. I've been doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes for well over 20 years now. I love the work I'm doing. I love getting to work with the members, and I love coming up with new things that we can continue to add and connect people here at Career Crossroads.
Yeah, it is a good call out. Like if we had employee numbers, employee badges, you would in essence be employee number three. Not a lot of
Yeah,
people think it's me. It's not. It's you. You were
I
around
know.
long before I was.
Yeah, that actually came up in October at our leadership meeting.
Uh,
It was funny. Somebody in the room said, "Well, I'm probably other than Jerry, I'm the longest one here. I've been here longer than Barb." And I'm in the back of the room, like, "Bet you haven't."
you've just, you've been out front. You've had a microphone. You've been whatever as long.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
so great. So Barb, so it's interesting perspective there now because
Yeah.
you've seen it all. You've
Yeah.
you've seen it all. So this labor of love we've done as a podcast included, and have been a big part of that behind the scenes. So let me ask you, as we go into this best of episode, uh, which one did you pick as your favorite podcast of the year?
Okay. Okay. I will admit it was a hard choice. I had some favorites for a variety of different reasons, but this is the one I settled on, and it's episode number 28 with Lindsay Zualaga from Higher View. I picked her because we've been doing a lot of conversations this year around pay transparency, and rightly so. And those conversations are certainly going to be continuing, obviously, as the next year comes around. But what I really liked about this conversation is it had to do with transparency in AI in recruiting tools. So I liked that transparency, but from a different perspective. And then take a step back, a few weeks before we had Lindsay on the podcast, we actually had a fantastic discussion with Lindsay, Athena Karp, and Barb Hyman, three rock stars in the industry, talking about AI and transparency and the way they're using AI. So I loved that, and I loved the lead into having Lindsay as a guest, and I thought she did such a nice job explaining how, not how they're using AI, she didn't go into that very much, but really just why it's important that vendors open the doors and let people see how they're using AI and what impact it has on their tool.
Yeah, and Lindsay was a big part of that explainability statement
Yep.
that HireView had kicked out, and so it was just really fun to just sit down and talk with her. And you're right. I mean, she's definitely a power interviewer, like a power guest. How about that? A power guest.
Yep.
But the show that we had done just prior to that was pretty great, and we do quite a few. So those two I'd put in my top. If I were picking, probably in my top 10, and we do one or two shows a week all year.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But it was hard to choose. We've had some really smart guests, and we've had people bring in some really interesting perspectives on so many different topics related to recruiting. So it was a really hard choice, but I settled on Lindsay because I thought that whole AI piece is something people aren't talking enough about, and I thought it'd be really well worth a re-listen.
Good stuff. We're going to hear more about transparency and AI, and of course, pay and pay equity as we get into 23. I think it's a great choice, Barb. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, let's listen to it. That takes us to the question everybody's dying to know, Lindsay. There's two kinds of people in this world. You're either cake or you're pie. So, Lindsay, are you a cake person or are you a pie person?
Oh my gosh. I can't have gluten, so I'm technically really neither. But I have been known to ask for cheesecake, which is really pie, on my birthday.
Gosh, it is really pie. I just had
Yeah.
this debate the other day.
So as a kid, I wanted my mom to make her really good cheesecake for me on my birthday rather than the traditional cake.
Oh man. Now, is it a regular cheesecake or is it like a super fancy cheesecake?
It's pretty standard, but delicious.
Crushed is the graham cracker crust.
Yeah. So now I got to get the gluten-free version, but still sometimes do.
Oh man, I'm definitely a pie guy. Although I had cobbler last night, and this has nothing to do with anything. I don't think that's either cake nor pie, is it? Or is
Oh,
everything cake or pie?
it seems yeah, that's a physics question.
That's why we bring smart people on the show to answer real questions that matter, Lizzie. All right, are you ready to get going?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Welcome to the CXR channel, our premier podcast for talent acquisition and talent management. Listen in as the CXR community discusses a wide range of topics focused on attracting, engaging, and retaining the best talent. We're glad you're here.
All right, good day, everybody. I'm Chris Hoyt, fan of pie, and your host for today's Recruiting Community Podcast episode. If you're new here, that's okay. We actually hope you'll make yourself at home and jump right in if listening live on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. You can do that by just saying hello in the chat stream, putting your social or professional profiles in there, or even asking today's guest any question that you'd like. I'll do my best to include that here with an overlay and a shout out for you. So if you're watching it, you're going to see that on the screen. And if you're listening, we'll say your name. So don't be shy. Also, this show, so that you are reminded, is powered by love. That's right, love. It means we don't have any sponsors or people that actually pay or contribute in a monetary way to the show. We just sit down once a week and we actually talk to people that our community members and leaders have said they'd like to hear from or learn more about. So please hit the like and subscribe buttons and visit our community online at cxr.works to literally see how you can help determine who should be next and how you might even be able to join us for a chat or two. Now, I am happy to introduce a new friend to today's episode. She is an intellectual force to be reckoned with on the topic of data science and AI, and was a recent CXR community panelist where we discussed with about 40 companies or so the importance of transparency and ethics within the realm of AI. And she's a new CXR Talent Solutions community member herself. Please welcome to the show, Dr. Lindsay Zaloga. There we are. Hello, Lindsay. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
We're really excited to have you on. But before we jump in, I've got 3 or 4 questions I want to ask you. We've covered pie. We've covered cake. Thanks for being a pie person, by the way. Why don't you give us sort of an escalator pitch about who is Lindsay and why should we be paying attention to what Lindsay has to say?
Oh, about me, not HireVue.
just about you. Like, give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
What you do at HireVue would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, so I always start with my pretty far back. I've always loved math, and I didn't really understand why math was important until I took physics. So physics was a huge kind of force in my life. I had a really great teacher in high school who really turned me on to this is how math is used in the real world, and I thought that was really cool. So I was the first person in my family to go to college. I was very intimidated by studying physics. It was what I wanted to do, but I was very nervous about, kind of succeeding at that. But I kept chugging along, finished my undergrad, ended up going to grad school, ended up getting a PhD and doing research in physics. And when I started my PhD, I really thought I wanted to work with my hands. I didn't want to sit at a computer all day. So I was an experimental physicist and aligning lasers and working with nanoparticles. But much to my surprise, what I enjoyed the most was sitting at my computer and analyzing data.
Over lasers. You liked that more than lasers.
Yeah, there's a little more. When something's wrong with your computer program, you can actually figure out why most of the time. But in the real world, there's so many variables, and I had a lot of holes burned in my shirts from lasers. But a lot of time spent in dark rooms. But so when I transitioned, I did a postdoc as well in Germany, and then when I transitioned into industry, I was kind of in this weird position where in some ways I was overqualified for a lot of entry level jobs because I had a PhD.
Yeah.
And I'd been working in that academic world for years, but also underqualified because I never had a job before. I think I really underestimated the value of connections. I kind of thought, my resume or CV, which you'd say in academia, speaks for itself. And I, have been doing pretty well in academia and it's very competitive. So I should be fine in the real world, as I put it. But when I started applying for jobs, I was shocked at kind of how broken the whole system is. And I know a lot of people who are in this position as well, where they tell you it's really important to curate your cover letter and your resume to that particular job.
Yeah.
And so you go into some applicant tracking system, you upload those things, you've already spent hours working on that, and then you have to manually re-enter every part of your resume again into the system. It's just painstaking. You press submit, and often you never hear anything ever again.
Right.
So that was a pretty awful experience. And I know so many people that went through that who are now in good jobs and they're successful and they're doing really well. And so you have to think, how many people passed them up, or did they just never get seen by these companies that kind of missed an opportunity in finding talent?
Lindsay, did you graduate yesterday? Because there's a lot of companies that's still going on.
Yeah, no,
It's still a lot of companies.
It wasn't too long ago.
Yeah.
I like to think it was more recent than it really was. It feels like yesterday, but no. No, so I think that, that experience, I got into data science at a really good time when it was still pretty new and there wasn't data science majors. So a lot of people from different STEM backgrounds coming in, using data in the real world, writing code to analyze data, all that stuff that I like. And so it's kind of an opportunity when I got into it, and then, learned about what HireVue is doing and was really excited because it tied to my own experience. And so HireVue is a talent experience platform. We are kind of known for the asynchronous video interview, which our founder had that idea in 2004 when he had the idea to ship everyone webcams so they could record themselves taking an interview.
I remember that. So I was in the space when that was still going. You know who else was in the space? Jerry Crispin was in the space. Say hello to Jerry. He just popped by.
Hi, Jerry.
So Jerry, I remember when this was like unbelievable. Nobody could believe that an organization was shipping cameras. Right, I know we're totally off topic, but was shipping webcams out so that people could get, to make a better sort of pitch for themselves and sort of get to the front of the pile.
I love that. That was brilliant, but at the same time, nobody had the experience of talking to dead air, and so the whole skill set of being able to just talk to yourself and answer questions and still be, engaged and whatever. Was a skill I think that a new generation had to learn.
Oh yeah, well, it's a good call out, right? Really struggling to talk to the camera at all. Now we're all pros, especially given the last 2 years. But yeah.
Yep, it is. It is a different. I took a HireVue in my experience of applying for jobs as well, and I remember being pretty thrown off at just kind of, what is this, right?
Yeah.
And I think now it's more and more people have experience with HireVue, or just, talking to a camera, recording themselves and all that. The technology has lent itself really well to doing that.
I still want a friendly avatar to be asking me those questions. I just say,
Jerry,
I don't think we're far from that, but you could say, well, would you like to have some semi-human thing, talk to you and make you feel a little more comfortable?
We've had the discussion. It's been hotly debated. And kind of, we don't want to be in that uncanny valley, as they say in AI, when you have some creepy, but then you have these deep fakes that can ask questions. Yeah, I think there's
you could create your own like they could pick what celebrity gets to interview them. So I'd like a Tom Cruise deep fake, or I'd like a Emily Blunt deep fake to interview me. Yeah. My interview with Emily Blunt would probably then be like 4 hours long because we just chatted up. It'd be fine.
I'm sure she would love you.
Yeah, of course. The deep fake Emily would love me. Look, okay, so on to track, Lindsay. So you are quite literally a scientist, and we have had quite a few conversations around AI and the topic of transparency within that space, right? And ethical AI. But let me ask you why you sort of feel that transparency is so important when we talk about AI within the world of talent, within the world of interviews and hiring decisions. Why does Lindsay feel like it's such a big deal?
Yeah, I think so it ties back to my experience somewhat, right? With kind of,
Yep.
it's a black box when you apply through an ATS and you never hear anything back. You don't even hear back, no, you didn't get the job, or
Right.
here's how you did, or anything like that. And so for the candidate to understand what's going on, I also, I've been in this space for about 6 years with HireVue, and the change I've seen in that time is huge. Kind of going from a little more secretive to protecting our IP to really opening up everything that we do, because we want to make sure people don't assume the worst, which was often happening, right? It's creepy. You're using a video. What are they looking at? Could they be
Yeah.
not hiring me because of my skin color, because my eyebrow moved a little weird, things like that. Those kinds of questions and concerns really have pushed us more and more to open up and be very clear. And it's been good because it's pushed us to also question certain things that we've done. Now, like if it's concerning our use of video as a good example, it was really not offering a lot of predictive power, and it was causing more concern than it was worth. So now all of our models are just based on language. So there's been kind of this healthy kind of a lot of communication between us and our expert advisory board and academics and candidates and audits that we've done that have kind of formed our direction. And going, really transparent more lately with our explainability statement. So this is a document where the short version is, I think it's about 20 pages long, but there's a longer version as well, but we kind of walk through, how we approach AI, how we use it in our system. Certain interviews that are recorded are scored, and here's how we train those algorithms. Here's the data that we're using. Here's how we test for bias. Here's how we mitigate bias if we find it. All of those things are outlined for anyone to read, candidates, customers, anyone interested in the system. So we hope it answers a lot of questions that people have, or concerns that they may have.
Yeah, and I think we sort of say tongue in cheek when we say it's the short version. It is the short version for real, and 20-something pages is no joke. It is worth the read, though, to sit down and go through. And for those who are listening, if you're watching live, we've got the URL up on the screen. But for those who may just be listening, it's just cxr.works/documents/HireVue explainability statement. And there's dashes between each of those, but we will put it in the show notes too, so it'll actually be a real link. But you can check that out. It is worth going through and sort of exploring that document and the work that's gone in on it. And I imagine that this is the first iteration of this, right? I suspect we're going to see maybe a couple versions of this as this grows and the knowledge and awareness increases.
Yeah, it's a living document. So as things change and grow, we'll update it. We also have some audits out there. If you Google around, you can find a couple of audit reports that we've shared publicly as well. And I think that's a great step. Audits are interesting because no one knows really what an AI audit is. And we did a few that kind of approach it from different lenses, but all of those are interesting.
Yeah, I love that. So let me ask you, Lindsay, what do you think are some of the ways people from your space, from our space, are actually making an impact or a difference outside of obviously the explainability statement and the tremendous amount of work that's gone into that, but making a difference on the topic of transparency and ethics in artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I think 5 or 6 years ago, that topic was just not even a part of the data science toolbox,
Right.
really. So it is changed entirely, where that's a part of data science education. It's actually not as simple as it might sound. Like there are even mathematically many different definitions of fairness and bias, and it's impossible to satisfy all of them at the same time with most real world data. So you kind of have to pick which ones are important to you. Outside of just the math, there are many different ways of looking at fairness. Our audit with Kathy O'Neill is a good example of kind of looking at all the different stakeholders that interact with the system and concerns that they might have. That's not just mathematical. It's kind of the process and functional kind of bigger picture, holistic picture. But we've seen, this become a really big part of the conversation in obviously a lot of realms, but hiring is a big one. It is, AI is being used at many different places in the funnel, and I'm kind of talking about the assessment piece, but even just to how do you source candidates? That sourcing is an interesting area, I think, because when we assess candidates, they've applied for a job, and so there are guidelines from the EEOC, and there are many, precedents that have been around for decades around kind of how we define fairness in that sense. But when you're talking about before application, it's kind of a different world, and it's you have like kind of like programmatic advertising type, almost like targeted marketing type issues, where are we saying that if someone looked at handbags, we're never going to show them a software engineer role? Like, who's even regulating that, right? Like that's just like a totally new question. So I think, there are a lot of players in this space, and we had, I sat down recently with with Athena from HiredScore and Barb from Sapia. It's two really great examples. Sapia put out a really great document on how they approach their FAIR framework. I know that we have a couple players in the space, also from Pymetrics, people that have done audits or are testifying for things like this New York City law. We're seeing a lot of talk in the regulatory space. So I think it's very important that we are a part of that conversation, and we know the realities of this area of kind of the whole area. And I think New York City is an interesting point. There are some things that lawmakers will write into a law with good intentions, but we need to weigh in. In this case, there's a 10-day waiting period.
Yeah, and I'm going to say what you're being so nice about. Some of our lawmakers are just dumb. Like when it comes to the topic of AI, right, or it comes to the topic of even hiring and employment, some of them are just dumb. And so I think it's super important to get brilliant people in the space together, like you or Athena and Barb, like Frida and many others, to come together and say, look, this is what this actually means. Let us help to educate you.
Right.
And that's why we were excited to see the HireVue team join this talent solutions community piece that we put together. Now, this is an effort for those who maybe haven't heard yet. Jerry's way more elegant than I am, but the idea here is that the talent solutions community is establishing a baseline on this topic and a few others, sort of pulling the industry together to sort of help define these challenging issues, right, together, and getting momentum. There's a live meeting coming up, I think, in Chicago. We're doing that. I love to say live meeting again. It feels so good. But where we're bringing those guys together, and in no particular order, we're talking about obviously HireVue and some brilliant folks we've pulled in: Seek Out, Oracle, iCIMS, HiredScore, the Mom Project, great people, Spark. We've got Higher Ed, College Recruiter, Shaker Advertising, Phenom, Pymetrics, Social Talent, Aspen Technology, Cielo, Paradox, Compa, and Appcast. And I think there's a partridge in a tree that we've added to that as well, that we're excited to come. It's about 21 companies that have come together. We're being incredibly particular with it, but at CEO founder level, that are doing exactly what you're talking about, Lindsay, is pushing to raise awareness and drive those that legislature work in the right direction, right, to help provide some guidance and a resource and a hub of information and experts. I don't know, Jerry, if you want to add to that. Did I miss something?
Just one observation in terms of the conversation that we're having is that when we look at all of these issues around transparency, a lot of them are in the past were designed around what we would do to touch the candidate, if you will. And now a lot of this has to do with how the candidate perceives what we're doing to them. And so it goes back from an academic point of view to the set of validities that, because when you learn in academia about validity, you learn that there's various kinds of validity, from face validity up to predictive. And the scientists love the idea of the predictive validation approaches, but fundamentally what's coming to the fore with transparency is face validity. It is the perception of the candidate about what is happening to them and their perception of that being fair or not. And that's why we have so many different approaches to all of this. But in the end, it's the candidate who's going to perceive recruiting as something that is a fair, competitive practice that they can engage in, that doesn't screw them over. And if we can get to that level because of that transparency, we are literally moving the industry, and the industry should certainly have a strong voice in addition to all the other folks who want to weigh in on this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lindsay, let me ask you, I mean, what would be a good resource, I guess, for people who perhaps want to dive in deeper? I obviously start with the explainability statement, right, to work your way sort of through that. But is there anywhere, a podcast, a book, anything you might recommend to let's say a talent leader or recruiter who just wants to learn a little bit more about the topic of ethical AI or making AI a better person in the hiring process? Anything you'd recommend?
Well, obviously, your community is a good one. Shout out. I think, we participated with the Data Trust Alliance, and that's something that I think within the last year they've come out with kind of guideline framework. If you're looking at vendors in this space, what questions do you want to ask? There's a lot of I know Athena mentioned the World Economic Forum has a council on AI. I also think just kind of keeping an eye high level on the regulatory legislative space. There's a lot going on, and it is going to be really hard to keep up with all the individual states, but it looks like that's the way it's going to go. So but we're going to see a lot of the same themes that probably are coming out of Europe. That a lot of states will adopt. So it's already starting to happen, and a lot to keep up with.
It's a good call out, because we do see a lot of, from a data privacy standpoint and fair, we're seeing a lot of it sort of develop in Europe, and specifically out in the UK, and sort of come over slowly but surely into our practices here. So it is a good call out to keep an eye on across the pond, so to speak.
And Lindsay, have you come across PIA? I think it's a group that Vizier has been heavily engaged with, or Lexi Martin, who was with it.
I haven't.
I'll actually pull that up, Jerry, if you want to talk about it. I'll pull it up and put a link in.
Intelligence Alliance.
Yeah, I think it's another effort of, again, our industry trying to do something in a collaborative basis, specifically on some of the technology issues. And I just connected Frida with Lexi Martin, who is heading up that group, and she's been a long-term PhD who's very, very much an advocate in this area. So I'd be happy to connect you as well.
Great, sounds great.
Yeah, here we go. I just pulled up her profile. I'll share it. She's on. I'll put this on here in the chat real quick on LinkedIn. Anybody's interested? Let's see. So
yeah, finding ways that we can find more collaboration with folks who can agree that we should be moving in a particular direction, I think lends kind of a catalyst feel to building a voice for our industry.
Yeah, and I think most people in the industry are broadly supportive of the regulation that's being brought to the fore. I mean, it's kind of saying, hey, if you're using AI in this space, you still need to be following the rules, and most of us are, hopefully. So, but then there's weighing in on kind of the details, like that aren't really. I mentioned the 10-day waiting period. If you make people wait 10 days, they might not get the job, right? Like there's a lot of things that are kind of throwing sand in the gears, but in the wrong place. And so I think it's really important for us to be active and making comments and kind of educating legislators on that.
Cool.
Yeah, there you go. Threw that on there. So it's peopleintelligence.org as we can find out more. If you're watching on the video stream instead of just listening, we had put Lexi Martin's LinkedIn profile up there. She's been a guest on the show as well. You can listen to a past episode there. Lindsay, for the sake of time, I'm going to ask you the question that we ask everybody before we close out the show. If you were going to write a book on this topic, what would the title of that book be?
I think I would say, because I've been on both sides of this hiring interaction, I think of it as I would name my book "Needles in the Haystack." There's not just one needle, but there are many. So how are you going to find those people, right? And we talk about how things used to be, and sometimes people think it's still this way, where you go down and you get an application, you fill it out, and you apply for a job at a brick and mortar place, and it is just, that world is so far gone. Every position has hundreds or thousands of applicants, and that is just the reality of what we have to deal with. So many of these solutions aren't perfect, but there is no perfect solution. So how do you kind of, what's best for those needles in the haystack, and what's best for the person who's trying to find the needles, to kind of get rid of people who aren't a good fit and find the right fit, is kind of the way I think about it a lot.
I like it. I love it, actually. So now I'm really going to put you on the spot. Who gets the first signed copy?
Well, since you asked, I guess it's you.
Yeah, nobody ever gives me
you're the
the
one
copy.
who impetus for this whole idea. My book career was all because you asked that question.
Man, I'm just glad I could contribute in some way. I'm just excited about that. Nobody ever gives me the copy. We've been asking that question for a year. Nobody gives it. Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate you. All right. Well, speaking of appreciate you, we are so grateful for your time today. Thank you for cutting out of your busy schedule to just give us a couple of minutes and share your insights. I hope that some folks connect with you directly online and that this is beneficial. And I really look forward to seeing you at some of the TSC events coming up.
Yes. Thank you so much. It was fun chatting with you both.
Thanks for listening to the CXR channel. Please subscribe to CXR on your favorite podcast resource and leave us a review while you're at it. Learn more about CXR at our website, cxr.works, facebook.com and twitter.com/careercrossroads, and on Instagram @careerxroads. We'll catch you next time.